Traction, A Startup Guide to Getting Customers by Gabriel Weinberg and Justin Mares. Picture this. It's a gorgeous San Francisco morning, and tech's biggest players are streaming into a PayPal conference. Developers, executives, journalists, everyone's buzzing with anticipation. But as they approach the entrance, something stops them dead in their tracks. Right there, impossible to miss, sits a 600-pound block of solid ice. And frozen inside? Stacks of real dollar bills, with a message that cuts deep. PayPal freezes your accounts. Unfreeze your money. This wasn't some accident or angry customer protest. This was pure, calculated genius from a tiny, nobody ever heard of them startup called WePay. They knew PayPal's Achilles heel, their habit of freezing accounts, and instead of throwing money at boring banner ads, they created a moment nobody could forget. That single ice block generated more buzz in 24 hours than most startups get in their entire first year. It was audacious, it was brilliant, and most importantly, it actually worked. It was proof that people were paying attention. That proof? It has a name: traction. Today, we're diving into the book that cracks the code on exactly this concept. It's called Traction, A Startup Guide to Getting Customers, and it comes from two seriously sharp minds, Gabriel Weinberg and Justin Mares. Gabriel founded DuckDuckGo, the search engine that had the audacity to challenge Google, and now handles billions of searches annually. The guy knows a thing or two about getting noticed in a crowded space. This book isn't ivory tower theory. It's battle-tested strategy drawn from their own wins and losses, plus interviews with more than 40 successful founders who've been in the trenches. Here's the thing. We live in a world drowning in next big thing ideas. Most people pour every ounce of energy into crafting the perfect product, polishing features, tweaking code, obsessing over design details. They tumble headfirst into what the authors call the product trap, convinced that if you just build something amazing enough, customers will magically materialize. But this book drops a truth bomb that feels almost wrong at first. Having a great product isn't enough. Not even close. The number one killer of startups isn't a bad product. It's having zero customers. So by the time we wrap up today, you'll understand the fundamental mindset shift that separates the startups that explode from the ones that quietly disappear. You'll learn a straightforward, 5-step framework for discovering exactly how to flood your business with customers, and you'll get introduced to 19 different paths that can take you there. This isn't just business mechanics. It's the art and science of making people actually care about what you've built. It's about getting traction. Let's paint a familiar scene. A scrappy team of founders hunched around a laptop in a garage or corner coffee shop, running on caffeine and sheer determination. They're grinding away, completely absorbed in their product. They add another feature, then another. They agonize over button colors, redesign the logo for the third time, rewrite code to shave off milliseconds. They're absolutely convinced that once they nail the perfect product, the world will come running. It's a beautiful vision, really. It comes from genuine passion and a hunger to create something meaningful. But according to Gabriel Weinberg and Justin Mares, it's also a dangerous fantasy. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Almost every failed startup has a product. What they don't have is traction. So what exactly is traction? The authors nail it with a simple definition. Traction is quantitative evidence of customer demand. It's the concrete proof that something's actually working. If you're building an app, it's seeing your downloads climb week after week. If you're selling something, it's real people pulling out their wallets. If your product is free, it's a user base that's genuinely growing. Traction is growth. That beautiful upward curve on a chart that makes investors lean forward. Talented people want to join you, and journalists want to tell your story. In the startup universe, Traction beats everything. This simple insight leads to the book's first mind-bending lesson, the 50% rule. The authors argue that you should split your time 50-50, half on building your product, half on getting traction, at the same time, from day one. For most founders, this feels completely wrong, like you're deliberately sabotaging your product development. But here's the twist. You're actually accelerating your path to success. Think about it. When you work on traction early, real market feedback starts flooding in. You discover the actual words people use to describe their pain points. You figure out which groups get genuinely excited about what you're building. You learn whether reaching them is even possible, or if it's going to drain your bank account. This information is absolute gold. It doesn't just sharpen your marketing, it makes your product better. Dropbox learned this lesson the hard way, and then the smart way. Early on, they tested search engine marketing, buying Google Ads to see what would happen. People clicked, which seemed promising, but the math was brutal. They were paying over $200 to acquire a single customer for a product priced at just $99. That early traction experiment taught them something crucial. This path was a dead end. So instead of pouring more cash into a losing strategy, they completely pivoted their approach. They focused on viral marketing, building a referral program right into the product, where inviting friends earned you more free storage. That single decision, born from an early traction test, became the rocket fuel for their explosive growth. They didn't wait until their product was finished to think about customers. They ran both tracks simultaneously. So if you commit to spending half your time on traction, a new question immediately pops up. Where on earth do you start? The marketing landscape is overwhelming and confusing. There are so many options screaming for attention. Should you buy ads, launch a blog, hit up events? This is where the heart of the book really shines. The authors interviewed dozens of founders and discovered that all successful startups get their customers through one or more of 19 specific channels. 19 distinct paths to traction. But here's the most critical insight. Something Peter Thiel, PayPal's founder, hammers home. You probably won't have a dozen equally good strategies. Most likely, one channel is optimal. Thiel is blunt about it. Most businesses get 0 distribution channels to work. Poor distribution, not a weak product, is the #1 cause of failure. But if you can nail just one channel, you've got a real business. If you spread yourself thin across several without mastering one, you're toast. So the challenge becomes finding that one single best channel for your business, right now, at this moment. How do you do that without burning through all your time and money? This is where the authors introduce their most powerful tool, the Bullseye Framework. Imagine a target with 3 rings: outer, middle, and bullseye center. The framework is a simple 5-step process designed to help you find your bullseye, the one traction channel that will unlock your next growth phase. Step 1 is brainstorm. This is where you force yourself to think beyond your comfort zone. You take all 19 traction channels and brainstorm at least one idea for how you could use each single one. Every single one. Even the channels you're biased against. If you're a developer, you might dismiss sales or offline ads as not your thing. If you're a marketer, you might write off engineering as marketing. The brainstorm step deliberately fights these biases. You ask yourself, if I absolutely had to use trade shows, what would I do? Or, what's a wild, unconventional PR stunt we could actually pull off? You write down every idea, no matter how small or ridiculous it seems. You research what's worked for similar companies, and just as importantly, what flopped. Step 2 is rank. Now you look at your sprawling list and start organizing. You place each of the 19 channels into one of the 3 target rings. The outermost ring, let's call it long shots, is for channels that seem least promising. The middle ring, potential, is for channels that might possibly work. And the inner circle, promising, is for the channels that feel most exciting and ripe with potential right now. Usually only a handful of channels will truly stand out. Step 3 is prioritize. You look at your inner circle and pick just 3. Only 3. Why? Because testing one at a time is painfully slow, but testing too many spreads you impossibly thin. 3 is that sweet spot that lets you run cheap, parallel experiments while maintaining real focus. Step 4 is test. This is where your ideas collide with reality. For your 3 chosen channels, you design quick, inexpensive tests to answer key questions. What will it actually cost to acquire a customer here? How many customers are even available? And are these the right kind of customers for us? The goal here isn't to generate tons of traction yet. It's to gather data. You're not launching a massive ad campaign. You're running a few cheap ads to see click-through rates. You're not sponsoring a huge conference. You're attending a small meetup to gauge reactions. You're spending hundreds of dollars, not thousands, to see which of your 3 channels shows real promise. Step 5 is focus. If everything goes right, one channel will clearly outperform the others. It'll feel different. The numbers will look better. The engagement will be stronger. When you find that channel, you pour everything you've got into it. This becomes your bullseye. Your mission now is to squeeze every drop of traction from this one channel. You become an expert in it. You run more tests, optimize your messaging, scale up your investment, and ride that growth wave until it naturally plateaus. That's the Bullseye Framework. Brainstorm, rank, prioritize, test, and focus. It's completely repeatable. Once you've maxed out one channel, you run the framework again to find your next bullseye for your next growth stage. Now let's talk about your arsenal. What are these 19 traction channels? The book dedicates an entire chapter to each, packed with stories and tactics. We won't dig through all of them, but let's explore some of the most powerful and fascinating ones to spark your imagination. Let's group them into themes. First up, reaching the masses. These channels are about getting your name out there in a big, splashy way. This includes public relations and unconventional PR. Traditional PR means getting your story into newspapers, magazines, and TV. The book points out that the media landscape has completely transformed. You don't just pitch the New York Times directly anymore. Stories filter up now. You start with smaller, niche blogs that are easier to reach. The bigger outlets read these smaller blogs, hunting for their next story. So you pitch the blogs that big journalists follow, and let your story climb the ladder naturally. But unconventional PR? This is where things get seriously fun. This is about doing something so remarkable that media can't help but notice. We've already talked about WePay's Ice Block. Another legendary example is Half.com. To launch their company, they convinced a tiny Oregon town called Halfway to officially rename itself Half.com for an entire year. They announced the launch on the Today Show with the town's actual mayor. It was such an incredible story that it generated national coverage and millions of impressions. DuckDuckGo pulled a similar move, putting up a billboard in Google's own backyard that read, "Google tracks you. We don't." That single billboard created a story that doubled their user base. Then you've got offline ads and social and display ads. These are your billboards, TV spots, radio commercials, and the banner ads and Facebook ads flooding your screen. Many startups dismiss offline ads as old school and irrelevant, But as the book points out, that means there's way less competition. The secret is tracking. You can use unique phone numbers, special website URLs like your company.com/radio, or discount codes to measure effectiveness. Social ads work differently. They're less about immediate sales and more about building demand over time. It's about growing an audience through compelling content and engagement, then eventually converting them. Next theme, earning attention. These channels aren't about buying your way in. They're about creating genuine value that naturally pulls people towards you. This is where search engine optimization and content marketing really shine. SEO is about getting your website ranking high in search results. The book breaks this into two strategies. The fathead strategy targets broad, popular terms like accounting software, super competitive territory. The long-tail strategy targets thousands of more specific, less common searches, like accounting software for freelance hairdressers. These long-tail searches collectively make up 70% of all search traffic. A powerful way to capture this? Content marketing. This means creating a blog or resources that genuinely help your target audience. The Unbound story is incredible. They hired a full-time blogger before they even had a product. For an entire year, they blogged about problems their future customers were facing. By launch day, they had an email list of over 5,000 eager people ready to buy. Their blog was, and still is, their main customer source. OkCupid took the opposite route. They were in business for 5 years before starting their blog, OK Trends. But once they did, their growth exploded. They used data from their dating site to write fascinating, sometimes controversial articles about human behavior, like how your race affects the messages you get. These posts went viral, generated massive media coverage, and shot them to the #1 search result for online dating. Then there's this brilliant channel called Engineering is Marketing. This is where you use your tech team to build free tools that genuinely help potential customers. The classic example is HubSpot's Marketing Grader. You plug in your website and it instantly generates a free report on your marketing performance. It's incredibly useful. Over 3 million websites have used it, and it generates a huge chunk of the 50,000 leads HubSpot gets monthly. These tools are assets. You build them once, and they deliver customers for years. Third theme, leveraging others. These channels tap into existing communities and platforms. One of the most effective early-stage channels is targeting blogs. This is different from PR. This is about getting directly in front of audiences on niche blogs your customers already read and trust. This was Noah Kagan's secret weapon at Mint. Before they even launched, his goal was 100,000 users in 6 months. He identified every small to mid-sized personal finance blog and reached out. He didn't just beg for reviews. He offered to pay them a few $100 to sponsor their blog and give readers early access. This strategy alone delivered 40,000 users before the product even launched. Business development is another powerhouse in this category. BD is about creating strategic partnerships that benefit both sides. Kayak, the travel search site, got early traction through a partnership with AOL. Kayak powered AOL's travel search engine, which instantly sent them massive traffic. The key to BD? Stop thinking about what you need and start thinking about what your potential partner needs. How can you help them hit their goals? Answer that, and you can create powerful win-win relationships. Then there's existing platforms. Building on top of platforms that already have hundreds of millions of users, like the Apple App Store, Google Play Store, Facebook, or newer, fast-growing platforms. Evernote mastered this. Their strategy was being one of the very first apps on every new platform. They were among the first Android apps. They were one of the first 100 apps in the Mac App Store. Being early meant less competition and a much higher chance of being featured by the platform itself. That featured placement on the Mac App Store was their single biggest growth driver for an entire year. As co-founder Alex Pachikoff puts it, being early is risky, but the initial boost you get is free. Final theme, building your tribe. These channels create deep, personal connections with your users. This includes community building, fostering connections between your users, and turning them into passionate evangelists. Wikipedia runs on this. Jimmy Wales described how he built a community that created the world's largest knowledge repository. It's about having a mission people want to join. It's about transparency and empowering your most passionate users to help lead. Speaking engagements, offline events, and trade shows fall here too. Delivering a killer talk at a conference can instantly establish you as an expert and flood you with interested customers. Sponsoring or hosting your own events, even tiny meetups, lets you connect face-to-face with customers. As Paul Graham says, early on, you have to do things that don't scale. You have to recruit users manually. These high-touch channels are perfect for that. So we've got these 19 channels, and we've got the Bullseye Framework to find the right one. But the book doesn't stop there. It gives us a way to manage all this effort, the concept of the critical path. Your critical path is the absolute shortest route to your next major traction goal. First, you need a meaningful goal. Not vague stuff like get more users, but something specific like reach 1,000 paying customers, because that makes you profitable. Or hit 100,000 daily active users, because that unlocks your next funding round. It has to be a goal that genuinely transforms your company. Once you've got that goal, you work backward and identify the absolutely necessary milestones to get there. These are your critical path steps. Maybe it's launching a key feature, getting featured on a specific blog, and hiring a salesperson. Everything else? Distraction. For any activity you're considering, ask one simple question. Is this on our critical path? If not, don't do it. This ruthless focus prevents startups from getting pulled in a million directions. It keeps your limited time and energy laser-focused on what actually moves the needle. This brings us back to the leaky bucket analogy. In the early days, when your product isn't quite right, your bucket has leaks. You can pour customers in through marketing, but many leak out because the product isn't sticky enough yet. This is why the 50% rule matters so much. As you work on traction, you get a steady stream of new users. By watching their behavior, you see exactly how leaky your bucket is. As you work on your product, you're plugging those leaks. Your traction efforts give you the feedback to plug the right leaks. Once the bucket stops leaking so badly, once you hit product market fit, that's when you confidently step on the gas and pour resources into your chosen traction channel, knowing customers will actually stick around. That's the journey this book takes us on. It starts with a radical idea: your product alone isn't enough. It gives you a system, the Bullseye Framework, to find your customer path. It hands you an arsenal of 19 creative weapons. And it provides a mindset, the critical path, to keep you focused on what truly matters, making real progress, gaining momentum, and achieving that beautiful, undeniable sign of life we call traction. When we step back and look at the big picture traction paints, what's the most powerful takeaway? For me, it's this single, liberating truth. Finding customers isn't some mysterious art form reserved for marketing geniuses. It's a science that anyone can learn and systematically apply. So many aspiring entrepreneurs, especially young ones, are bursting with passion for their ideas. They're builders, creators, dreamers. But they often harbor deep fear or disdain for marketing. It feels sleazy, fake, or just completely overwhelming. This book completely demystifies the process. It transforms marketing from a vague, intimidating monster into 19 distinct, understandable channels. It gives you a methodical process, the Bullseye Framework, that feels like running scientific experiments. It gives you permission to test, to fail small, and to learn, rather than expecting you to magically have all the answers from day one. The book's real genius is its balance. On one hand, it's incredibly pragmatic and data-driven. Concepts like Noah Kagan's quantitative marketing spreadsheet at Mint, or the focus on metrics like cost per acquisition, keep everything grounded in reality. This isn't wishful thinking. It's about finding what actually works and doubling down. But on the other hand, the book absolutely bursts with creativity. Stories like Half.com renaming a town, WePay's Ice Block, or Blendtec's Will It Blend, videos remind us that getting attention is also about being remarkable, clever, and human. It's about creating stories people want to share. What feels particularly relevant today is the book's emphasis on the law of shitty click-throughs, coined by Andrew Chen. The idea is that all marketing channels eventually get saturated. What worked brilliantly yesterday might be crowded and expensive today. This means you can't just copy what big companies are doing. You have to constantly experiment, constantly hunt for the next untapped channel, the next creative strategy your competitors are ignoring. This is where a startup's agility becomes its superpower. By taking each of the 19 channels seriously, especially the unconventional ones, you can discover competitive advantages hiding in plain sight. So how can you start applying these ideas today, right now, even if your project exists only in your imagination? Here are a few simple actions. First, honestly assess yourself. What's your current split? If you're working on something, are you spending all your time on product? Try consciously carving out time this week, even just a few hours, dedicated solely to thinking about traction. That simple shift is your first step toward the 50% rule. Second, run a mini bullseye brainstorm. Grab some paper and write down the 19 channels. Don't stress about details. Just spend 10 minutes brainstorming one wild idea for each. What's the craziest, unconventional PR stunt you could pull? Who are 3 niche blogs you could target? This exercise will stretch your thinking and reveal possibilities you didn't know existed. Third, embrace cheap testing. Pick one idea from your brainstorm that feels interesting but slightly scary. Then ask, how could I test this for under $100? Could you run a tiny Facebook ad campaign to a super specific audience? Could you sponsor a small meetup for the cost of pizza? The goal isn't success. The goal is learning. This book is way more than a startup manual. It's a blueprint for anyone who wants to share their creation with the world. It teaches us that building something beautiful is only half the battle. The other half, the part so many of us neglect, is the journey of connecting that creation with people who need it. And that journey, as this book so brilliantly demonstrates, is one of the most exciting and rewarding adventures you can take. That was a deep dive into the core ideas of traction by Gabriel Weinberg and Justin Mares. We've explored the highlights today, but let me be honest. A summary can only be a map. The real adventure happens when you explore the territory yourself. The true value of this book lives in the details, the specific tactics for each channel, the in-depth case studies, and the way a particular story might spark the perfect idea for you. This summary is your starting point, designed to help you see if this book's journey is one worth taking. If anything we've talked about today has sparked even a little excitement or curiosity, I strongly encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning. It's about arming yourself with a toolkit that can genuinely transform how you approach building and sharing your ideas with the world. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, If you found this summary helpful and want to keep exploring wisdom from the world's most impactful books, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.